Hello everybody! Welcome to today's video. My name is Hannah and I have my sketchbook out and I have this grand idea to try a realistic portrait using alcohol markers. I have tried this in the past and I have failed miserably. So for some reason, I'm trying again and giving it a real shot. So lately I find myself being very inspired by TV shows or video games or just different forms of entertainment, so this video is no exception. I have been really enjoying post-apocalyptic type TV shows and games, and this spread is inspired by The Last of Us, which started as a video game, and then it became so popular and everybody loved it, so it became a TV show, the one with our most beloved Pedro Pascal. But I decided to let my inspiration flow with the video game version of Ellie. In the very front of my sketchbook, I did a version of Joel, and I really wanted to do Ellie next to him, but for some reason I just really wanted to do a huge version of her, and there just wasn't space where I wanted to do her, so she gets her very own page in my sketchbook. So I have a very warped way of mapping out the face. I don't really have a rhyme or reason for any way that I do it, except that I just kind of do whatever I want. and it kind of hurts me in the long run because I always have to go back and then readjust everything. Now, as I was doing this mouth, I could sense that something was off, and I was starting to figure out that it was the nose. The nose was way too long. I was trying to trust the process here and just kind of see if maybe if I did the mouth, it would work out. And then I stare at it for a really long time and realize it's gotta go. So that was the very first time that I readjusted. And I readjust everything except for that right eye because I really like how that eye turned out. I end up moving the left eye a little bit closer to the right eye and making it just a tiny bit smaller. I like how it turns out, and I generally do enjoy mapping out the face, even though I do have to adjust everything multiple times. But I do want to eventually come up with a better system of mapping out the face. Now, I have heard of a lot of different methods of mapping out the face. One of them is like blurring your eyes so that you see just a very simple version of the general placement of where the eyes are and the mouth, and then and don't add any details until later. But I don't know how to do that, so I'm going to practice and I'm going to try that and get better, hopefully, and then maybe that will save me the heartache in the future of having to adjust everything multiple times. But do I do that in this video? No. This is the pained version. So when I tried using alcohol markers to color a face in the past, I really failed at using multiple colors for the skin. I was just kind of thinking, I wasn't thinking. I was just hoping that maybe I could just do it like a coloring book and have it be really simple. But when you're sketching out such a detailed face, it looks weird, in my opinion, to not have detailed coloring. So I think that was my problem in the beginning. Now with this portrait, I wanted to do a base layer of the skin tone first, and then I was planning on working up from there. Guys, I am so proud of how I did this pupil right here. I did it really small with the black at first, and then I blended it with that green because I wanted the black to like seep out, because if you look at real eyes, there's not like a crisp line around the pupil. It does kind of like zigzag around the circle. And I love how it turned out. I do end up darkening up the eyes later on, but for now, I am trusting my instincts of staying light first and then building up slowly, darker and darker, because you can always cover up light stuff, but you can't really go back once you go too dark. Kind of like that saying. Anyway, so I start in with the cheekbones and start building up some of these layers very slowly. Since this is the first time that I have done a realistic portrait with alcohol markers, I have learned that I do need to get darker faster or darker earlier on in the process because this paper can only hold so many layers before it just kind of, the whatever layer you put on top just kind of like sits on top, and it doesn't blend very easily the more layers that you put on. So you'll notice, I'll bring it up later and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'm very slowly adding in colors here and slowly bringing the eyes to life, and this nose turns out amazing. I love this nose. So speaking of the nose, I do still think that the nose is too long, even though I did shorten it, because while this portrait that I'm drawing turns out really cool and I'm really happy with how it turns out, I think she looks too old. I think that the Ellie version of the reference that I'm looking at looks a lot younger, and I'm pretty sure that the reason is because all of her features are really scrunched up, which to me portrays youth. Anyway, so what I'm getting at is I think that I did her nose too long and her mouth a little too far down. If I had done them a little shorter, she would have looked younger. That's what I'm getting at here. Now I did this stripe of green, and I'm rethinking everything. In the reference photo, there is a reflection on her face, and at the very edge of the reflection, there's like a glow of green. I wanted to capture that so badly, but I don't know how with my current skill set. I think the green looks great here, but in the middle of the shadow, it's really tricky. So I move on to other things while I think about it for a minute, and I move on to these lips, and I pick out a color based on the reference photo, and it looks so dark. And I'm starting to rethink like everything, and I'm feeling very humbled because the face is starting to look weird with that green stripe and the lips are too dark. But I do my best with the dark lips, and I have forgotten that these markers change color when they dry. They lighten. So I finish up with the lips, and then I move on to the shadow, and I'm feeling a little bit defeated with the green stripe and the dark lips being way too dark. So I am more willing to be risky here because I'm like, well, go big or go home. I've already messed up. So what's the harm in taking a risk and exploring and seeing if what I'm doing is actually going to work instead of giving up? Hair is something that I'm also very inexperienced with, and I'm trying my best to make it look good. One thing that I generally forget about is that you can use the same color layered on top of itself to make it darker without having to get a different color to make it darker. Although I still have no idea how I'm going to do this shine in the hair. And, you know, I do what I can. I think it ends up looking terrible, that shine. But it is what it is. It doesn't ruin like the whole picture. It's just kind of a weird thing. If you happen to notice it, you're like, huh, that's a decision. Anyway, so once I finish the hair, it's very glaringly obvious that the eyebrows need to be done. So I do up her eyebrows, and I try to keep in mind the direction of the direction of the eyebrows to make it look more real. Because eyebrows don't really grow in one direction the whole way through, and if it did, it would look really odd. This is where I'm starting to notice that the paper can only hold so much ink before it just sits on top of everything else. So it looks almost like a separate watercolor vibe here, and it's taking forever to dry. So I just kind of leave it how it is. Oh yeah, this is the weird highlight decision that I made. Enjoy. I really do like these flyaways. It makes it just adds like another element, you know? So she's about done and she needs some highlights. So I go in with my gel pen. I think that this is the Jelly Roll, you know, the one that everyone talks about and everyone uses. For a good reason. It's a really good gel pen. And she needs freckles. This I'm really nervous about. And apparently I crack my knuckles when I get nervous. So I decide that the way I'm going to approach these freckles is to take 3 different darker tones of brown. And then after I put the dots down of various sizes and shapes, I go in with the lightest skin tone and kind of give it an area to spread. So it's not like a harsh line between the freckle and the skin. It kind of blends out a little bit. And then because freckles in real life have lots of variation, I add a second color of brown. I go in with this time a lighter brown and give kind of that those faded freckles a shot. And then I go in with the darkest brown and add some dark brown freckles. I do want to take out my gel pen one more time and add some reflections to the skin just to make it look a little bit more glowy. And if you notice the lips, I do end up darkening up the line between the lips off camera, but you'll see it later on. So once I was done with Ellie, I was going to be completely done with this video and be done with the Last of Us spread, but it was still itching at me a couple days later that I'm just not done with it. So I was thinking about whether or not I should do a TV show version of Ellie or something else, and I wasn't about ready to open that can of controversial worms on my channel, so I'm going with a very tender part of both the TV show and the video game and draw in a T-Rex. I had no real plans for how I wanted this part of the spread to look, and I just kind of went with it. The reference that I was looking at was cut off on the feet, and if you notice, I gave him dog feet on an accident just because I wasn't paying attention and I was so used to drawing dogs and cats. So this T-Rex has weird feet. Don't worry about it. He looks very cool. And he has an underbite too. I love him anyway. He's special, okay? So at the very beginning of this spread, you notice that I held up a green colored pencil and the green pen. I was originally going to use the green pen a lot more, but I ended up liking the colored pencil better. I always had the intention of blending it out with the Ohuhu colorless blender to get that cool effect that you know I love. And in the past I've done colorless blender over ink before and it's done a great job, but for some reason I just wasn't really feeling it. I don't know, I was just liking the colored pencil better. Maybe because it was darker and the green of the pen was a lot yellower. Anyway, so I used the pen for the grass and it's my weak point, grass. I think it always looks weird and I always try really hard to make it look cool and it always looks weird. Someday I will figure it out. Today is not that day. So I might have mentioned before, but I did not really have a full, complete picture of how I wanted the right side of the spread to look. I started with the T-Rex and then I just kind of added one thing at a time without thinking of the big picture in the long run. So had I actually thought about how the background would turn out, or that I would even have a background, I might have decided to do the T-Rex differently. But I did the T-Rex first, and then I added the background as an afterthought, and I used alcohol markers. I actually really like how the background turns out. It's probably one of my favorite backgrounds I've ever done because it's the only background I've ever really done that has a landscape as the background instead of just like cool designs. I'm a huge fan of landscapes and I'm so intimidated most of the time by them, so I don't even try. But for some reason, I took it on as a challenge and I did it one step at a time, one tree at a time, and just let it be a little bit abstract. And that was okay with me. And genuinely pleased with how this turns out. So I'm doing 4 different colors for the leaves and then a brown for the trunk of the tree that goes all the way up. And then I end up going in with a fine liner and just kind of loosely suggest the shape of the leaves around each clump of leaves. It looks so cool. I cannot wait for you to see the end. So as I previously mentioned, I'm kind of doing the background in one step at a time, not really thinking of the bigger picture. And this was one of those times where I realized, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? I start putting things down without having a plan in mind, and I immediately have to go into problem solving mode. I don't know what this is supposed to be. And then I draw shapes around like rocks would be there, but there's clearly no rocks there, so I don't really know what's going on in my head at this point. So I leave it how it is, and then I move on to more trees, and then I'll come back to it once I find out what I want to do. The trees in the background, I used the grayish versions of the green that I had been using to make them look further away, and it looks really cool. I am so in love with the fine liner on these leaves. This is one of those times where just winging it is paying off. Now I'd thought to do this because initially I was going to be done after I did the alcohol markers and just kind of suggested trees to be there. And then I walked away and then I came back and it looked too abstract for me. So I wanted there to be more of a weight to the lines and just kind of give it more structure. So that's where the fine liner came into being, and very happy with it. Once I was done with the trees, I looked around at the rest of the background, and the rest of it needed a little bit more something with some line art. I decided to make this look like a, what do they call it? A berm? I don't know if that's right, but make it look more like a steep hill. So that's what I was trying to do with the lines on the lighter green part of the background, like behind the T-Rex. And I'm trying to salvage whatever I can with the grass in the front. It is what it is at this point. I think you can tell what it's supposed to be, and I guess that's all that really matters. All right, so here we go. This is the finished spread that I've made for The Last of Us. And on the left we have Ellie, and on the right we have T-Rex. I really hope you enjoyed coming along with me through this spread. It was so much fun to make, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.